Morning, everyone. My name is Blake Washington, and on behalf of Governor Hochul, I'd like to welcome you all to the Quick Start meeting, which is a public board meeting for a public meeting among us all in anticipation of fiscal year 2027. I'm the state budget director, and I'm here joined by, on my left here, we'll begin with Josh Rissler, who's from the New York State Assembly, Philip Fields from the Assembly as well. We have Matt Howard, one of my deputies in the Division of Budget, Mark Massaroni, deputy in the Division of Budget as well, Maria Doulis from the Controller's Office, the newly appointed wonderful team coming into 2027. We have Chris Friend representing the Senate Majority and the Senate Finance Committee, and Jeff DiGirolamo also from the Senate Minority, both of whom were appointed within the last handful of weeks. We're delighted in the Division of Budget to have you both. We're excited to see what you can do. The Senate, both sides of the aisle are really well represented with you both at the helm, so congratulations, and you'll learn the secret handshake as you go. You need more time for that. But today's meeting, as I alluded to before, is a component of the Quick Start budget process as prescribed under state law. The Budget Reform Act of 2007, authored by Philip Fields, requires the Division of Budget, the Assembly, the Senate, and the Office of State Controller to separately publish revenue and spending estimates for the current and upcoming fiscal years, and then meet, as we're doing today, to discuss those projections. Following this meeting, we'll publish our findings, our collective findings, on the Division of Budget website. And our overarching goal is to encourage the enactment of an on-time budget come March. And but above all else, this process seeks to foster a productive dialogue among us all, and to better assess and identify the difficult choices that we have to make in each and every year to put together a budget. This will give us all a sense of, we'll pull back the curtain a little bit, and you can kind of see some of the things that the Division of Budget is seeing as well. The public can see what we're all seeing as we're coming into budget, the executive budget process of 2027. One thing that we were talking about coming into today, and there's been some upside and some positive news as you've seen in our mid-year report. But I thought it would be helpful just for the public to know where we were when we enacted this report, the beginning of our fiscal year. And it was one that was marked by a great deal of uncertainty about the economic outlook and there was in federal policy specifically. The United States economy experienced the first contraction in 3 years over the first quarter of 2025. Economists were warning us all of slow growth, and elevated inflation was still with us. Financial markets were volatile, mostly surrounding trade policy. A major reconciliation bill was in the ether at the time. It was being negotiated, and we knew there were major consequences for federal funding as it relates to state tax receipts. And as a result, when we put out the enacted budget plan, the fiscal plan, the Division of Budget revised its expectations of revenue downward significantly. And since that time, a lot of those signs that we were seeing upon enactment have subsided. The economic outlook has improved significantly, reflecting strong wage growth and financial market strength. Improved wage and bonus forecasts and a strong year-to-date collections have led to upward revisions in the tax receipts forecast of $2.6 billion in the current year and $5.3 in 2027. So the state's finances remain favorable going into the next fiscal year. Tax revenues were higher than originally estimated, driven by the strength of our PTET and our personal income tax. PTET is the pass-through entity tax for people that don't follow this jargon, and we're seeing an upward trajectory on both in the remainder of 2026 and in the out years. We have a stronger labor market, and those are a reflection of that. We have the economic overview in general is more positive, and that flows through the forecast. Wall Street, upon which the state of New York is dependent upon in a manner that is outsized relative to any one of our peers in the 50 states, has been performing very, very well. And so forecasts on bonuses and the like, which are a key component of of what we do, will be an important contributor to increased tax receipts. So as a result of all of this, cumulatively speaking, the out-year gaps on our state financial plan have been reduced by roughly $7 billion. And so that gives us a little bit of breathing room, certainly coming into next year. We were once projecting a gap of 7.5. Now we're down around 4. So spending of our estimates for the financial plan have been revised upward in the upcoming year, unfortunately. So we have new revenue, but some of our spending estimates for the upcoming year have been revised upward. In many ways, just as a reflection of H.R. 1, the reconciliation bill I referred to before, having been signed into law on the 4th of July. Those costs we are projecting in the mid-year report will result in roughly $800 million in new costs in the current fiscal year, which goes through March 31st, and roughly $3.4 billion in the upcoming fiscal year. That's our exposure. That's what we're tracking in real time. Spending in the current year, per our financial plan report, has been revised to reflect additional costs for food security programs to assist families that lost SNAP benefits as a result of the prolonged shutdown. As you all are aware, under the governor's leadership, we provided additional resources for HIPNAP and Nourish in just the last couple of weeks, just to make sure that our food pantries had resources on hand to support those in need. So the Division of Budget in each of the 4 conferences that I'm working with today are projecting U.S. GDP to grow between 1.7 and 1.9% in 2026, following a 1.9 to 2% growth estimated in 2025. Division of Budget and the legislature generally agree that U.S. economy has likely avoided an economic downturn in the near term. Inflation has eased a bit, and the shift in the Federal Reserve's approach to monetary policy will ease credit conditions and lower the costs associated for borrowing for consumers and businesses alike. So that's good news. If these trends continue, that will just support additional consumption, investment, and continued employment growth. DOB and the legislature generally agree that the U.S. and the New York economy face risks that could shift the economic and fiscal outlook, and there's a lot of uncertainties as a result would generate adverse impacts to the state financial plan. But as of right now, we do see, as we reported in our materials, things have improved markedly. Any deviation from this forecast, the forecast that we're talking about before, and we'll go through some slides, could represent a material impact to our financial plan and the revenues we have on hand to support the many things that we care about. We certainly have continued pressure in the Medicaid program. We both from utilization and continued elevation of inflationary costs in the medical sector, medical spending sector. So that's something we're watching. But working with the governor under her direction, the state agencies have been doing everything that they can to sort of to mitigate the impacts of or the need to have retrenchment in the upcoming year to any large degree. Looking at contracts, making sure that the investments that the state is doing are the appropriate ones at the appropriate time, and just trying to take a critical eye at all the state spending items, certainly on behalf of our agencies. So we're doing that. That restraint from the state agencies plus elevated level of revenues are putting us into a more favorable position coming into next year's budget. So what I'll do is I'll just jump into this slide deck that we have before us, and hopefully the clicker works. And this will get us through the report that the Division of Budget just put out a couple of weeks ago, and then it'll contrast ourselves to the legislature as well and the State Controller's Office. And then after this conversation, we'll open it up for the panel to comment as well. All right. So first slide is something much of which I spoke to before, fostering a good dialogue among all of us, demystifying the process, letting the people at home know that we as a collective, that we in the Division of Budget, the Assembly, the State Controller's Office, have steady hands on the tiller. We're watching these data as they come before us, and we communicate it on a regular basis. and we try to just explain what we're seeing in the trends. Quick start process requires all of that, but most discreetly, it requires a discussion on Medicaid, school aid, and public assistance, trends for the future. Requires that we jointly publish a report by the 15th of November. As I noted before, with improved revenue performance and good decision-making on behalf of our state agencies, we were able to, in the last handful of months, in the face of a whole lot of uncertainty on the federal side, shrink the out-year gaps by a cumulative $7 billion. As you can see in chart one, in spray one there, we were projecting upon enactment $7.5 billion gap coming next year. It's down to around $4 billion. And that'll help us. It helps us to make some decisions that are a little bit more balanced coming into next year's budget. And we believe in the division budget that a $4.2 billion gap is something we can accommodate if, obviously, if working with the legislature, rowing in the same direction, getting to zero is required under the state constitution. We can do that. We see this number as one that's completely manageable. And then you can see in the out years, the gaps are elevated, but you can almost, this is sort of like a sign that, if you restrain some of our spending into coming in the current year, you can kind of start to mitigate the planned spending for 28 and 29 and even into 30. As I talked before, the all funds tax receipts improved markedly. So this chart, if you can see it, you have the 2026 executive budget, the enacted budget, and the mid-year report, and you could see the dispersion between all three. The mid-year report is the bar that is at the top. The enacted budget report being the red one, that was the Division of Budgets projections when we, again, adopted a budget amid a great deal of uncertainty and turmoil. And when some of those factors have been mitigated, our receipts are changing accordingly. In 2027, total state spending is projected at $155.7 billion. No surprise to anyone in this room, the two major components of spending in the state of New York are school aid and Medicaid. So here what the values would, for the state share of each one of those items would be in the upcoming year, absent any changes. This would represent a spending growth rate of roughly 5.5%. Nearly 60% of our growth is attributed to Medicaid on a year-to-year basis, and Medicaid alone is going to grow by, again, absent any changes, roughly $5 billion. And the reason it's growing so high is because we have stubbornly high enrollment post-public health unwind. We also have wage growth, and we also have to deal with the effects of H.R. 1, which I alluded to earlier. If it's the $800 million and the $3+ billion coming into next year, most of that is related to Medicaid and a changing federal landscape. All other growth, school aid will grow roughly 3.2%, absent any changes, and all of the spending would grow roughly 2.8% in the upcoming year. On Medicaid, this is a slide that we like to track because it shows both spending and it shows utilization or enrollment as well. You can see that the peak of enrollment was roughly in 2023, a couple of years after the pandemic, and since then we're starting to trend downward to normalize as people will go back to work and as people otherwise just are no longer availing themselves of the Medicaid program. But you can see that the trajectory, the downward trajectory, is more slight than the upward one, which means that we're going to have these costs with us for a while. I think it's fair. On school aid, spending for the school year 2026 is currently estimated at $37.6 billion, which was an annual increase of $1.7 billion. or 4.9% over the school year 2025 level. 2024 provided a nearly 10% increase in state aid and reflected the final year of the phase-in of the foundation aid formula. So you can see those the three bars in the center that are elevated relative to the rest. This is Governor Hochul's commitment to make sure that this longstanding legal challenge to how we fund our schools was met, and the governor has carried it forward. On public assistance spending and our overall caseload, as many here are aware, public assistance is provided to eligible needy families in the state of New York that include a minor child through family assistance, and also to individuals and families who are not eligible for family assistance. Those are your single adults, childless couples, families who have exceeded their TANF timelines. They get resources through the safety net program. So prior to the pandemic, public assistance caseloads were pretty stable, plus or minus, you can see over those years, but post-pandemic, with the expiration of very large cash transfers from the federal government, with the expiration of unemployment insurance, persons that availed themselves of unemployment insurance during the pandemic, public assistance caseloads have increased dramatically. That's what this chart reveals, particularly in the city of New York. And they're expected to continue increasing over the life of the financial plan. So to those that can actually read this document in front of me here, this is a comparison of our spending estimates among the Division of Budget, the Senate, and the Assembly. And you can see that there's minimal variations between the parties. The executive and the Senate majority are in agreement. The Senate and the Assembly minority have slightly lower total values, driven by lower estimates of school aid. This, again, is on the spending we're projecting for these major categories of service. The Assembly majority has a slightly higher value on school aid based on school aid projections, but all these values fall within a range of $616 million. So it's good to see. I think people at home should have comfort in knowing that the legislature, the executive branch, we're all plus and minus around the same of what we're projecting for spending in the next year. There's not a whole lot of variation there. So it shows that there's not a lot of mystery about what's feeding these variables, and that's good news. On our economic outlook, one of the items that we're also charged to discuss is, well, how do all these we have spending, how are we going to meet those costs? And the way you meet those costs is with revenues, and revenues are contingent upon a favorable economy and favorable economic fundamentals. So the outlook is brighter than initially expected at the publication of the enacted budget, as I noted earlier. But we all agree that economic growth is expected to slow a bit, approaching its long-term average rate in calendar year 2026. Corporate profits growth, while strong now, is expected to weaken over 25 and 26. And that's, when I say weaken, it's just really relative to where we are at this point in time, which is very, very favorable, but it's relative to where we are at the point in time. Weaken sounds like something more, like a little more editorial, but that's not what I'm getting at. The Fed began rate cuts in 2024, and the trend is expected to continue in 2025 and 2026. Again, as I alluded to earlier, this helps consumers and businesses to take out debt and to operate their businesses well and procure things for their families. In the labor market, the U.S. labor market has softened notably since 2025. We do see businesses maybe not hiring as much as they used to. There's a little bit of a defensive posture in the business community. But despite the slowing, both the U.S. and New York State unemployment rates are projected to remain stable. All parties agree that wage and personal income growth will continue slowing down through calendar year 2026. The state of New York, our employment growth has outpaced the nation in 2024, but has slowed in 2025. All parties agree that the state employment growth will slow further in 2026. While most of the nation's job gains in 25 came from the private sector, only about 1/4 of the state's gains did. Wage growth in the state of New York will slow during 2026 and will turn below the national rate. Personal income will also slow as a result in the upcoming year. On revenues, the Division of Budget increased our estimate of revenues by $1.6 billion upward in the mid-year update. And again, that was a reflection of a resilient labor market and a positive outlook for Wall Street. Year-to-date receipts for personal income tax and PTED has exceeded our projections from May. And the current year estimates of all fund taxes are among all parties, are within a range of $1.7 billion. All parties are more executive than the executive branch. Hats off to you. I hope you're right. But the variance is related to personal income taxes and user fees and taxes. So, but even though the positive variance is revealed here, again, going back to what our spending is, people at home should know that there are very talented people projecting all of these things, and there's different variables that are driving each one of these forecasts. And I think that every one of our economists, all of whom are in the room today, will tell you why they're right. And they also can tell you 5 reasons why, where there's caution for why they're right. So, but all that being said, these data show that we all have a good grasp on the what's underneath our feet. Revenue comparisons coming into next fiscal year. This is noted earlier. We have tax receipts, the Division of Budget revised upward by $2.7 billion in our mid-year update. And among all parties, the receipts revisions are within a range of $1.4 billion. And again, flowing from their current year, every party here, but for the executives, every party here is more optimistic than the executive branch. And the Senate majority in both houses of the Assembly anticipate higher receipts from PIT and user taxes as well. So there are risks, and this is something that my own economics team likes to, we talk a lot about this because it's very, very, we have to be guarded and we have to be alert to the things that are, to the underpinnings of all the things that New Yorkers care about. We have, in the state of New York, we have highly concentrated economic activity. We have resources that are being generated from finance, insurance, and the high-tech sector. And they provide for a disproportionate amount of tax revenue in the state of New York. And a downturn among any of those sectors has, an immediate impact upon the state's fiscal, upon the ability of the state's revenue generation. There's been a great deal of shifting on federal policy in the last couple of months, and that's going to remain, and we're still learning as rulemaking is continuing on the federal side. I think that as we move into next year's budget, we're going to start to see even more unforeseen things that that came from H.R. 1. How you implement those policies will have real and lasting effects for the state of New York. Changes on healthcare policy, immigration, federal spending, these all have material impacts on our budget as well. We have global risks. Those include like just trade policy, disrupting supply chains. We know of tariffs and how those are impacting everyday consumers. And there's other just the general risks, which are you think we're sort of pretty far from here in the state of New York, but we do worry about, as ever, global unrest, wars, and military actions in other countries. Among our trading partners and things of that nature, something we're always keeping an eye on. So to wrap it up, we in the state of New York are very, very fortunate to have a solid fiscal position at this moment in time, and it's a good problem to have. The immediate risk of an economic downturn has abated. Our forecasts have improved. Everyone's forecast has improved, as has the outlook. Revenue for taxes have been revised upward, helping to offset some of the growth in Medicaid and public assistance and other higher costs that have been foisted upon us by the federal government. The out-year budget gaps have been reduced, but they still remain, and it's something we have to be vigilant on coming into the 27 budget, excuse me. Being mindful of that and making sure that we're planning for the future. So we have to remain diligent with the state's finances and manage those risks to the economy and the financial plan as well. So with that, I'll do is stop talking, but I'll invite my counterparts that have joined me today to maybe remark on the findings that I said. But you don't have to comment on my findings, but if there's anything you want to add or any insight you have to offer, I'm all ears. So how about we start with Chris Friend from the Senate Majority.
Thank you, Blake, and thanks for that warm welcome earlier. I'm looking forward to working with you and everybody else in the room this year. So as you've outlined, we're all largely in agreement on forecasting a more positive outlook in terms of revenue than where we were projected to be at the time of the enacted budget. So as you mentioned before, Blake, wages and income remain strong with consumer spending and other indicators showing a much rosier picture than we or you all foresaw at the time of the enacted budget. Like you, we in the Senate Majority acknowledge some significant risks to the state's financial health that we'll have to address in this upcoming budget as well as next year. You already talked about a lot of it. There's some persistent inflation, impacts coming down from the federal government in H.R. 1 that we have to react to, and continuing funding for services in healthcare, social services, foundation aid, and a litany of other important issues. So with that said, we are happy to see that our projections, the differences between our projections are rather minimal. There's very little variation across the board, as you mentioned. So if we have a good foundation going into this challenging budget and look forward to any revisions, hopefully upward revisions in the executive budget.
Now I'd like to turn over to Philip Fields, Secretary of the Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. I appreciate the presentation you've given today and explaining the current situation of the state and federal government and our spending programs. I'd just like to thank some of my staff that worked diligently on this particular, Victor Franco and Colin, who's passionate in the revenue, and Ingbong, who never gives up as to why he's always right. So as we start our year, pardon? Yes. The Assembly Majority generally concurs with a lot of your trends and upward projections, both in the revenue and also where we are in spending. We also believe that the estimated revenues for next year slightly exceeds your presentation, but that's primarily, again, as you said, mostly in wages and coming from Wall Street and so forth. So we are definitely in concurrence with most of the people here at this table. Of course, my economics people definitely believe that there'll be a greater increase in economic performance and by more than 1%, both in wages and income as it affects the state of New York. But they also share, as you said, the downside risks that could occur next year. We know that the stock market is doing well and is performing well, but we also believe it still could correct itself in next year. And you also kind of mentioned the labor market, in which we still think it's layoffs are still low, but the Assembly recognized that layoffs could worsen rapidly. So we have both the positive and negatives to go with this. Primarily, we're grateful that all our spending calculations are pretty much the same. And again, we're thankful for that, but we are very concerned about the federal cuts and the federal policies that's coming next year that could have a dire impact on our budget. But we are, again, as we heard, we're looking to refine our forecast, make any adjustments as necessary, as well as prepare ourselves for any exogenous proposals that will come in the upcoming fiscal year. And with that, I would like to thank you for what you've done today.
Thank you, Mr. Fields. Now to Jeff DiGeronimo. I'm going to trip over that for a while, so forgive me. From the Senate Senate Minority Finance Committee.
Want to echo Chris and thank you for the warm welcome here and for your team's continued professionalism as we move through the process. We're encouraged by the optimism everybody has about our state receipt situation and would urge that in light of that, we are very cautious moving forward to getting to a balanced budget for next year without resorting to raising taxes on our already overburdened New Yorkers. I'd like to thank members of my staff who contributed to our report, Sean McKinnon, Charlie Silverstein, Shelby Lawrence, Kevin Gannon, and Sarah Patty. And we're looking forward to working with everybody and their teams in this room as we move into the executive budget, as we hopefully deliver a budget that works for all New Yorkers.
Thank you. Now on to Josh Rissler from the State Assembly, Ways and Means Committee Minority.
Thanks, Blake. It's good to be here today, obviously working together as we work and this important start to the upcoming budget. I also like to echo and thank the staff on the Assembly Ways and Means minority staff for their work on this project. Our outlook reflects a lot of what's been said already. We're showing the strong wage growth, the overall economic stability is there. We're projecting a little bit more above the mid-year financial plan in terms of our receipts, mainly stronger income tax and sales tax growth. We're also optimistic, of our gaming receipts, particularly mobile sports wagering. Those estimates are obviously coming in a little bit stronger too. With that, obviously, as mentioned today, there are some risks that are inherently that come with any forecast, and we're going to continue to monitor those risks. We do remain concerned about the structural growth in spending, particularly with Medicaid, and where we're heading with that. Obviously, there's that balance with any budget that we have to, just be cautious about with that growth. But overall, we'll keep bringing ideas to the table and hope to continue to work together as we work on an upcoming transparent budget that's on time. And, thanks.
Thank you, Josh. And I think you raised a good point, too, just to the extent that any of my colleagues have ideas as we move into next year's budget, the door's always open for you to, to dialogue with us in the division budget. We're always willing to run down those ideas for, from the ridiculous to the sublime. We're here to help, too. So, but we appreciate that partnership. So, last, I'd like to turn over to Maria Dulis, Deputy Controller from the Office of the State Controller.
Thank you. Thank you for that very detailed presentation and also for the opportunity to add the perspective of the Office of the State Controller. So our full report is available online on our website with the details behind our estimates. I'd like to present some of our figures in the aggregate. Relative to the mid-year update, alt funds tax receipts we project will be $1.1 billion higher in state fiscal year 26 and $2.4 billion higher in state fiscal year 27. These estimates include higher projections for collections from the pass-through entity tax. Excluding PTET, our projections are $268 million higher in state fiscal year 26 and $1.4 billion higher in state fiscal years 27. Our estimates for disbursements are largely in line with the mid-year update, except for slightly higher disbursements for public assistance. So I think, as you discussed, Blake, while forecasting is complex in any year, the actions at the federal level have really made forecasting even more challenging. The state is contending with its dual challenges of heightened economic uncertainty and a federal-state fiscal relationship that is being restructured. So accordingly, Controller DiNapoli stresses the need for caution and support for continued efforts to grow the state's reserves. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And thank you all again for joining me today. So on behalf of the governor, we appreciate your persistence, your diligence in pulling together your reports, coming in together today. As a point of personal privilege, I want to just thank the Division of Budget, certainly our Economics and Revenue team, our Financial Plan team for a lot of the great work you see in the public domain, but everybody in the Division of Budget plays a part in pulling together these documents and advising our process, so we thank them for that. Our discussion today will inform our deliberations as we go forward, and I hope we keep that line of communication open among all of us so that we can spot check and identify problems before they arise. But it is clear from the discussion today that all parties are anticipating continued but slowing economic and employment growth in the current year, which will have consequences for the financial plan, but I know that we can weather the storm together. We do have a strong financial footing and mounting pressure on a bunch of major categorical spending programs, which we're going to have to face together. So it really comes down to prudent fiscal planning and making sure that we are stabilizing spending, and we not just in 2027 for all the years to come. So with that, I just want to say thank you very much for being here, one and all, and I hope that everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Thank you.